I want to start off with a little something I did yesterday. Yesterday I was at my potting bench, and I was potting some of my succulents, stepping them up a size in their pots, taking some cuttings, and I was singing a song from James Taylor back in the 60s. I said to myself, how peaceful is this? How wonderful is this to just commune with nature, to be part of the children of Mother Earth. And that's what all our plants are. You know, we'll start off with the history of herbs. The herb garden was actually considered one of the first forms of garden art. It goes back a long way, and there's all kinds of documentation on it. But we have to remember the big thing about the changes in our minds towards plants as we have progressed as a people. Years ago, we considered herbs everything that Mother Nature had given us. There wasn't things just for seasoning. The first use of herbs were mainly in magic, ceremony, as well as medicinal, but also for household goods, for scenting things, for using them in the bath. I mean, every place that we walked and used our home, we also used herbs. And that's why they were called the children of Mother Earth. Years ago, what we did was we used geometric designs, but there are also a whole bunch of beautiful herb gardens that aren't necessarily geometric in pattern. They're more loose, more informal, and they look just as good, and there's been a lot written about those also. But like in the very front entranceway here, I noticed when I came in, the boxwoods that are there were set up for an herb garden type effect, is the way it looks. Right in the circle there, you can see the sections that were to be used for herbs. And that's a wonderful way of landscaping, but now the thoughts of herbs have changed. Has anybody ever drinking sassafras tea?
Oh, yeah.
Haven't we all? And now the government says it's carcinogenic, so we don't do it. But there's a lot of things that we have changed because we became more knowledgeable, and there's other things we've changed because our lives have speeded up so much. We don't have time to devote to things. Some of the herbs, especially when you get into your mints and things like that, they're very aggressive, they're fast growers. If you're doing it in a bed, you need to divide. It takes a lot of work to take care of an herb garden, but they're a beautiful thing. I like to do designs for herb gardens. I appreciate it when I do it. I don't use what we consider just herbs, because herbs nowadays is 10 or 12 plants that we use for seasoning. It's not like it used to be, where even junipers were part of the herb garden layout because of the fact that the berries were always used when they were crushed to season game, wild game like your boar and your deer, things like that. It would take some of the gaminess out of it, so it was also part of the herb garden. I love herbs, and the growing of them is a fantastic thing. Knowing when to harvest is an important thing. People don't realize that the amount of flavor in an herb leaf is best when it's taken early in the morning, right after the dew dries off on the plant. That's when it's strongest. The essential oils are there more at that time of the day than any other time. It's a constant learning process when you're dealing with herbs. The thing that I have learned in my time on earth is that I can't get in the ground like I used to. It's hard for me to get down there and do my digging. I had one lady that came out to the nursery, and she told me, she says, I've never raised anything in pots. She was from New York. And she said, I'd like to start gardening. She said, but I'd like to do vegetables and herbs and things like that. And I told her, sure, I'd help her and I'd get her started. Within a month, she invited me to her house to look, and I was just totally amazed. She had taken a backyard that had nothing in it and transformed it with beautiful decorative pots and paving stones and drip lines. This lady had done an immaculate job, and she is really producing a whole bunch of vegetables and herbs and things all in containers. I like container gardening. We're going to talk a little bit more about containers than we are in the ground, because there's just not enough people that are really wanting to landscape in the ground with just herbs. You know, there's too many flowering plants that you don't have to do anything to and just appreciate rather than go out there and work. And each individual has needs of certain herbs that they use more so than other ones. So it's hard to make a big bed using 30 or 40 different kinds of plants versus the 10 that you need. So that's why I go to containers more. The first thing we need to think about when we're talking about containers is the style, the type. I would use a lot of clay pots. Clay is really good because it breathes, and therefore you don't have to worry about overwatering so much. They do tend to pick up salts and things, so they are a little harder to clean. When you go out and you start with a clay pot, the first thing you need to do is soak it. Soak that clay pot until it takes in all the water that it can possibly take in. That's an important part of starting it. If you pot into a clay pot that hasn't been soaked, it's going to immediately start drawing the moisture out from the plant. So you need to soak the pot first. We always put something to cover the drainage hole. Now, I've had a lot of people say, well, I put a whole row of gravel across the bottom. I don't do that. I just put in one stone to hold the soil in and allow the water out. That's the only thing you really need to do. If you ever spend a lot of time with plants in containers, you'll find as soon as you pull a pot off, the roots have gone all the way to the bottom, and then they start back up in a circle. If a root gets to the bottom and finds a layer of gravel, then the root hairs that do all the absorption and all the eating of nutrients, the root hairs will burn off because they don't have soil to be in. They're in open air and gravel. So that's the reason I do that. I put mine all the way to the bottom. I always leave a little space at the top of the pot so that I can water and fertilize without flushing out my soil. A lot of people like the porcelain type pots, which are very good pots. They're good to use. You have to be more conscious of your watering than you do in a clay pot. But other than that, they work fantastically. The things to remember is how fast the specific herb that you're trying to grow grows. You don't want to put a fast-growing herb into a small pot. You'll be constantly disrupting it and moving it to a bigger one. You don't want to put a less aggressive herb into a big pot, because then the soil is going to stay too moist too long and you're going to run into other problems. I'm the type of person that I like to do everything organically. And there's reasons for that, because a lot of times I'm going to eat what I'm growing. And that's important to me. I try not to use chemicals as much as possible, or chemical fertilizers. I try to avoid them at all costs. You can build your own soil, either to use it in the ground, which you can't start off organically in the ground, but you can in pots. Organically in the ground takes years and years and years to be able to certify that it's organic. But they have organic potting soils, they have sands, there's all kinds of different things that are set up nowadays to make it easier on us to get started with gardening in containers and things. I like to mix a good organic potting soil with part sand. Most of your herbs you're going to find like the alkaline side of the pH scale, and they also like a quick draining poor soil. They don't really want a rich, real composted soil. They'd rather have something a lot less looser. If we're growing in the ground, I suggest to everybody, for anything they're doing, get a soil pH test done. Soil tests are very important. They're right down here on prints, the Clemson Extension Agency, and I think they charge $6 to do a soil sample. But just to give you an idea, I did a house in rice fields. She was having problems in 3 locations growing camellias and azaleas. I did 4 tests, 2 out front, 2 in the back. All 4 tests came back differently, and the one in the front where the azaleas and the camellias were doing well was an acid soil with a pH of 5.9. The other 3 soils came back over 7. That's alkaline. One of them was 7.9. That's extremely alkaline. Herbs wouldn't mind it, but there's a lot of other plants that wouldn't stand it, and that's why she couldn't grow her azaleas and camellias back there. So it's real important to get that soil test done. Once you get that done, then in the ground, you can make your changes, add lime if you need to sweeten, sulfur if you need to make it more acid. Does everybody understand what the pH scale is? Because it's a really important thing. Okay. We're going from there. The soil mixes that I use, I've explained to you about. The other thing that I do is any kind of insecticidal soaks I use pretty frequently, although I have found out that some of them are painful to some caterpillars and things, especially the monarch, which kind of upsets me, but at least we're doing the best that we can do. They also have things for disease control, and that's an important factor too, and they have those in organic things too. The maker of Hollytone is called Espoma, and the Espoma company has been doing organic things since the early 1900s. They make insecticidal soaps. They also make things for fungicides and things like that, so you can stay in an organic sense the whole time. Let's see. The best time to repot your herbs is in springtime. You can do it through the year if it's a necessity type thing, but you always have your best success repotting things in the springtime. The newest thing out, and something that I'm really, really excited about, in New York, in other larger states and larger cities, the restaurants have turned around to a new type of gardening of their own. They're using rooftops, and they're doing it hydroponically. That's where you soil this mixture, you're nothing but water, and they're doing their lettuces, all their vegetables for their salads and things at the restaurants. They're also doing their herbs for cooking, and they're doing them right there, so they've got them fresh at all times. We have a lady in our area that lives over in Pawleys Island, and she is a salesman now, a representative of a company that started to sell these products. And they stand about this high. They're somewhat tubular with pockets to the side, and you can put different herbs and different things inside of those to grow. All you need to do is provide sufficient light for it, fill it up one time, and watch her grow. To me, that's the most remarkable thing that's happened to this industry in a long time. We could take something like that and we can sit it outside, we can sit it in the house in a Florida room or a Carolina room and get sunlight to it. There's just so many different uses we could have for that, for not only just our herbs, but for lettuces and spinaches and everything else that we want to use along with that. I think it's a beautiful oncoming conception. We're going to have one at the nursery probably within 30 days. We're going to have it set up so that people can come by and actually look at it and decide whether they think it's worth the money for it. But I think that's going to be a great upcoming thing.